Hey, look who's back again. Let me see. A bit of water before we're going to start, and boom, welcome back again. Here we are on the third part of this 10 years journey. I left you that I just landed in Aotearoa with $50 in this beautiful land, translatable as the land of the big clouds. I landed in a city called Auckland, and I got to know that there was somebody that I knew that I lived with while in Australia that was now living in a city called Wellington. She could have given me a place while I was looking for a job and eventually finding my way. Perfect situation. There was only one problem, that Auckland, the place that I landed in Wellington, the place where this person was, were distant 900 kilometers. Yeah, 900 kilometers. So how to get there? Common sense, let me go to the bus station. And they told me, we have a bus today that goes to Wellington for $70. Or we have a bus tomorrow that goes to Wellington for $50. I was like, boom, perfect. But I knew, I was repeating myself, going to Wellington in another city, of course, Eurocentric also, finding a job again, and then all over. I was coming from a very different mindset by then, and I didn't simply want to arrive to Wellington. I wanted to find my way to Wellington. And I wanted to find my way through a slow pace. I wanted to absorb that culture. I wanted to absorb that beautiful environment that I only heard of. Which way was the best way in order to do that? Next things I know, boom, I walk. I decided to walk for 900 kilometers, starting just with the first step, with the idea of buying $1 of bread per day, getting water from streams, rivers, and eventually also householders, getting to know deeply more of the culture, of the local circumstances, and of course, of the beautiful environment. I was already walking for a day. I found a little forest, Flash Park. I fall asleep there beautifully. I woke up, there was a stream next to me. I drank that water. I bathed, it was so cold, it was in the middle of the winter. And then I kept on walking. What it turns out is that the island where I was, the North Island, was actually not as wild as expected. Was, yes, having a lot of greenery, but most of this green were mainly farm, fences, hills, and highways. So I was not really feeling it so much while I was on the walk, to the point that I was like, maybe I should just hitchhike and find my compromise with that. As soon as I thought of that, I swear, as soon as I thought of it, a car pulled over. And I was like, maybe they just wanted to have a rest, or maybe they need something. So anyhow, I kept on walking, and then I see this guy pulling down his window and asking me, hey, where are you going? Do you need a lift? I'm going to Pukekohe, which was the next town. And he was like, oh, I'm going to the same place. Do you want a lift? And I was like, yeah, okay, why not? So I jumped in the car. We introduced each other. His name was Andrew. He was such a nice guy, around his 50s actually. And he was like, oh, where are you from? I'm from Ghana and Italy. My father is from Portugal and my mother is from the UK. I'm also from Europe. It was weird because it felt like there was a connection created because of my European roots. And this was something very new to me because generally, especially in that European context, my Italianness was always very much denied, especially in Italian context. So right now, finding a common ground with somebody because of my European Mediterranean roots was very new to me. Of course, I explained the situation, where I was coming from, how I ended up there with $50. And he was shocked to hear. And he was like, I have a kiwi farm and it's actually pruning season and we don't mind extra workers. And if you would like to, I would be more than happy to give you a job. And I was like, I never worked in a fruit farms before. Nevertheless, in a kiwis farm, let me go for it. I accepted. So next thing we know, we actually drive directly to the farm. And this is the place where he was going. He was going to work. First things he wanted to do was to sort out an accommodation for me. And ideally, he wanted to do it within the farm so that it would be smoother for me to work and to move around and to do my own thing. I told him straight away that I could easily sleep outside and that I would actually enjoy to do that. But he was super concerned. He was like, oh, no way, it's too cold. And I'm not sure it could be even dangerous with animals and so on. So let me provide you an actual room. In the same farm, there was actually the house of his father and his mother. And next to their house, there was their old house that was now functioning as an office. Within this office, there were some rooms, and there was one big room that was looking like a big garage. And inside there was a kitchen, a toilet. And over there is where he decided to place a nice bed next to a heater, and he provided me a very nice cozy room from where I could easily move around and work from. And then he was like, oh, my wife is about to come and you're gonna meet her. She's actually also from Portugal, like my father. She was also working in the farm. So the wife's name was Amy. I connected so much with Amy, literally like more than a mother, I would say, also like a friend, like properly a friend. Was such a genuine and kind heart lady. I was very willing to explore more of the land nature, and she was bringing me to different places on nice beaches and then going for hikes together. It was a very genuine time that we spent together. I was so grateful. Also Andrew, such a very kind man from the bottom of his heart. But also the work was actually very pleasant, mainly not because of the work per se, but because of the people that I ended up working with. All the people, from the management to the leaders to the farmers, were all from Punjab. Punjab is a very amazing and rich region located in the west of India, close to Pakistan. Culturally speaking, Punjabi people were elite farmers, like next level farmers. So a lot of them migrated in the so-called New Zealand. It was actually very beautiful for me to keep that Indian connection, even though Punjab was very much of a different culture than Uttarakhand, the place where I mainly lived while I was in India. It was still very beautiful to exchange and to feel the vibe, to drop that roti, to have that tea. And yeah, it was overall a beautiful connection. And one thing that was particularly doing with Andrew that connected us a lot was going to the gym. He was trying to lose weight and he was finding me as a sort of inspiration because I was often very much physically active. So I was more than happy to go with him to the gym in order also to create that extra motivation for him to do that. While I was going to the gym with Andrew, I met quite a few people from other parts of Polynesia, especially from Samoa. I was not aware of what Samoa was, where Samoa was, and which culture was embedded. And while there, let's say that I've been nicely introduced to it. Whoever from Samoa was telling me was that back in the island, their life was simple, was in contact with the element, was self-sustainable. A lot of people were hunting, a bunch of people were fishing with spears, gathering food and fruits from the jungle. And when I heard it, my mind was gone. I was like, bye-bye. I was like, I'm out. I'm going there. I arrived in New Zealand with $50. I was paying for my own food. They didn't want me to pay any rent. And I managed to save up quite a good amount of money. And this also showed me you're going from 0 to 100 real quick. And it's just a matter of being able to flow and to find the right circumstances and to smell the right people and to trust also the right people. After 3 months, I find simply my way to Samoa. This was the first time, by the way, that I needed to also buy a return ticket because they wouldn't allow me to go there only with one-way ticket with the visa that I had. And because it was an island, there was no other way for me to leave that country without an airplane. So I needed to buy my way ticket, and which was booked back to New Zealand. I went to the main island called Upolu, in the capital of Samoa called Apia. Every journey on the airplane lands in the airport, and as soon as I go outside of the airport, apart from the KFC and the various shopping malls, I could see a hill range. As soon as I saw it, literally, I was like, let's walk there. So I started to walk there. After a couple of hours of walk, I ended up in this beautiful jungle, proper tropical weather, and it was so nice also to feel the heat, and I could feel myself in that ancient island of Samoa, also known as the heart of Polynesia. Once there, I could also spot some different houses, a lot of them also with traditional leaves or grass roof. And I was like, wow, some houses also built with wood and also some conventional roofing. And by the way, for the first time here, I was kind of fitting in. People were not constantly watching me like, who is this guy? Of course, he's a stranger. Actually, my physique was kind of melting within that context. And I felt it was nice to feel in not watching, not stared constantly. But I was walking with nothing than a backpack, very open eyes, very curious, and people were kind of wondering, and they were so welcoming, inviting me for tea, for talks. And then there was this lady around her 40s, 50s that she just asked me, where are you gonna sleep tonight? Oh, I'm having a tent and I'm gonna stay in the jungle on top of the hill where I was before. And she just stays silent and goes like, come with me. So I just followed her. Next things I know, I'm in her house, being introduced to her home parents, and she's there talking Samoan, and I couldn't understand on those days. The parents are smiling at me, and then she goes like, come follow me. She brings me into a room and says, well, this is your room. Like, okay, well, yes. I mean, it was just a decision made. There was no question about it. That was my room, finished. Choice, no choice. I was there, finished. It was such a beautiful, beautiful welcoming that she dropped. So genuinely, so genuinely. 1 day goes, 2 days goes, and I ended up staying there, getting to know the local communities and to see how much sustainability was around. People were gathering their own firewood, also growing their own food, as papaya, as chili, having their own chickens around. It was the first time for me meeting that degree of sustainability and also learning to get involved into different works, as farming, as refurbishing, with his father that was around 80 years old, yet so strong, able to just climb and fix his own roof, an 80 years old man. I learned so much from that experience that was so beautifully overwhelming. Samoa also was colonized, and the German went there, did a lot of things, New Zealand through the British and the Dutch. There was a lot of things going on, yet they preserved very strongly their culture and their ancient ways. But one thing that they kind of lost were their indigenous, natural, spiritual beliefs. Also in Samoa, European missionaries took over once again with their Eurocentric story of the white Jesus. That was also part of that modern side of Samoa. I was fully integrating within that society, and so also I was going to church and witnessing that type of church. One thing that attracted me about the Samoan type of church was that their traditional touch, original touch was still there, and nice dances, the way they were singing was really much coming from their unique way. And this is something that I really appreciated. There was somebody that I met in that church, a woman called Sina. She was asking, why did you arrive here? Why did you come in Samoa in the first place? I was really there for a week. I'm like, yeah, I came here in order to learn about the lifestyle that was lived before these modern times. I wanted to learn how to fish, how to hunt, how to gather my own food. And she goes like, you're in the wrong place. And I was like, what? If you want to really dive into it, you need to go to a different island. The island of Savai'i, or the island where I'm from, the island of Manonotai. And actually, I'm going to go there next week. If you want, you're more than welcome to come, to stay with me and my family. You will be really much welcome. And the next things I know, I'm in a new island, embracing a whole new chapter. Now, the first thing that needs to be mentioned is that in the island of Manonotai, there were no cars, there were not even bicycles, there were not even main road. There was only one walking path that within 45 minutes would have allowed you to go all around the island. Like, that's how next level that island was. We arrived there with a little boat, and then we started walking, and then we reached Lepuyai, which was the village where her sister was living. I received such a nice welcoming, especially from the kids. The kids were number one, so pure, so joyful, and we were going to the beach and dancing and swimming. I spent there a couple of days until Sina brought me to her brother's house. And this is where the whole game went to a whole next level. It was a village called Apai. And aside from this village, there was another little village made out of a family that it was composed by 10 people. And this family was her brother's family. His name was Pekeli, his wife was Puao, Puao's mother was Fafoe, Puao's father was Samaeli, and all the kids, and then Fafoe's mother, Sui, the elder of the family. Altogether, there were about 10, 11 people. As for this family, as for their environment, as for their lifestyle, if I thought that back in the main island I was self-sustainable, then whatever this family was living was going beyond that, beyond that. I witnessed stuff that I was only purely capable of dreaming still on those days. Going and spear fishing on the daily basis in this beautiful, crystal clear ocean. Going and collecting breadfruit, cocoa, papaya, coconut was just such a rich environment. Like literally, I was genuinely shocked. Being self-sustainable to the extent of also managing to making their own traditional clothing, sleeping mats, was really on that level. Of course, westernization arrived also on that island. Electricity arrived on the island. And with that, also a lot of modernization and urbanization and invasion was kind of bringing all of these ancient ways back. But to me, I felt incredibly lucky and privileged to be in that place in this time on earth. The amount of things that I learned from that family was something of a actually priceless value. Learning how to fish, and then we were eating together, we were gathering and dancing together. Also some churches around there, of course. still in a sort of traditional way. There were some events that was going on the church, so we needed to practice our dance and then perform it all together. I became fully a member of the family to the point that everybody knew me, and the Joshua version in Samoa would be Yosua. So I became Yosua and everybody knew Yosua. Now, once again, I was not shining because of the way I was looking, but at some point, of course, it was a small island and people knew that I was a Palangi, a stranger that eventually was not a stranger. Also, I must say, the language, the way I was learning Samoan, is the language that I learned the best. Like literally was to me very nice and receivable, and I could start to express myself quite well, and I was very proud of me, to be honest. And I'm playing with the kids on the daily basis, always playing, and being really free because of the sustainability, because of the social context, because of the accessibility to the resources that we had. We could also obtain more freedom of time, freedom of speech, freedom of being able to play with these kids so much on the daily basis, playing, and then going and gathering food and then going back and cooking. It was such a level of sustainability that reflected also on the healthy way of living of that little community. Most of whatever they had, like 80%, was coming from that very land. And I learned so much about self-sustainability to the point that I was like, wow, it is actually possible to live like this. Contrary than Northern Territory or different places where I was, that was mainly a touch and go kind of experience. In their reality, it was a lifestyle. In their reality, it was a lifestyle. And that made me realize this lifestyle, it is still possible within this 21st century. And this is really also what changed my whole life. It changed my whole perspective, because whatever was for me a possibility now became a reality. I started to be more and more integrated within that island, within that environment, to the point that also I remember Fafoe being like, maybe we should build a little fale for you. A fale would be one of those traditional houses made with coconut tree trunk and coconut leaves. So after 2 months being with the family, it was also time for me legally to leave that island. And so I decided to follow the legal way, and I went out of the island by going back to New Zealand. It was an emotional day when I left, to leave the kids, to leave the family, to leave the context. So far, I was jumping back to my legal flight, back to Aotearoa, back to what for me was still more New Zealand than Aotearoa. So I was back in Auckland, back in the farm with Andrew, Amy, and the family. It was very beautiful to be back in that context, and I see all my brothers from the farms. It was actually nice, but I could feel after that chapter in Samoa, it was almost impossible for me to re-embrace that Western way. It was very incredibly harsh. To the point that after a couple of weeks, I told them that I needed to go. I decided to go to the South Island. It was much less urbanized than the Northern Island. Indeed, in the whole of the South Island, only 1 million people were living there. It was an island big like Italy. It was very, very untouched. And that's the only place where I needed to go. I felt the need to practice whatever I learned in Samoa and to dive within the sustainable way, within also myself. The next things I know, I take the ferry that brings me to the South Island. I arrive in the South Island and I start to walk, and my idea was to walk all around. But what I realized is that it was so hard to walk. People were just keep on stopping and giving me lift. It was such a thing there to hitchhike. So everybody were just giving me lift, to the point that I was like, okay, or I need to be more serious about walking, or I'm just gonna have different ways where people wouldn't even stop and give you the temptation to go on a car. So I stopped in a shop. I found this bicycle for $50 and I decided to buy it. And I started to cycle. And this was for me a whole new, amazing, mind-blowing adventure. As for that chapter, it was something completely insane, completely mind-blowing. I was cycling without any destination, just for the sake of doing so. I didn't try to do 30 kilometers per day. I didn't try to reach any particular place. Just like, why do you breathe? It's the same reason why I was cycling. I was just flowing with the circumstances of life and stopping next to rivers and bathing and swimming and really feeling the strength and beauty of life within myself. I was often challenged, of course, physically, pushing the bicycle up, getting completely exhausted, at times with no food, fasting for days, at times managing to buy food from towns, also trying to hunt, managing to fish. Was a whole full-on adventure. Also implementing whatever I learned in India and diving deeper within the art of meditation and contemplation, of absorption of the surrounding area in order to find the oneness within everything. The beauty of that environment, the mountains, the rivers, the oceans, the penguins, the waterfalls. By the time I really decreased attachment to the point that I didn't even care if my belongings were getting lost, if the bicycle was getting stolen. I didn't have any luck, any nothing. I was just going, and life was bringing me whatever I needed to go to in order to challenge whatever needs to be challenged, in order to grow in any aspect that I still needed to grow. On top of the bicycle for almost 2 months, cycling for thousands of kilometers. By then we are in 2015 and now I'm 23 years old. 3 years passed since I left my little bubble, and now I'm feeling completely unlocked, completely free, completely able to represent who I truly was, which was not from this background, not from that background, was my true, real self on the planet Earth. In that time, I felt like I practiced whatever I learned all around the world, in Australia with Aboriginal people, in India with Rahul and his family and the Babas and monks, in Samoa with my dear, precious family. And I applied everything on that bicycle, with that approach, with that detachment, with that physical challenge, with that trial to be self-sustainable. Was another revelation that surely confirmed me that it was possible. I never met the Maori per se in the end, but I met their land. I met their ancestral land. I met the place that formed their culture. I met the place that gave them and gave me so much, to the point of changing the whole perspective of how I think about life altogether. A land of such pureness, to the point that I didn't have anything left in my heart than the willingness to live in that pureness, absorbed by that unique harmony. Yet, was I ready to do it alone? No, I was not ready. What was still within my heart actually was the willingness to share all that I learned in these 3 years with the people that I grew up with the people that I met on the way, with the people that I got to know in a context that was so far from this purity. And I wanted to share this purity with them. I wanted to share with them not only this opportunity, but this reality that could truthfully be livable. So that's what was in my heart. But I was not as ready to go back to that context as yet. I was not ready to go back to Italy. I was not ready even to go back to London. And I was like, I would like to go back to where I'm from in order to share, but I'm not feeling quite ready in my heart. I would like to move into the wild, but alone, I'm not ready to do it in my heart. The only thing I felt, I don't know why. I was very much in love with the culture of the samurai, how the medieval Japan developed from the Shinto ways to the samurai ways to the Zen ways. Always fascinated me a lot. And don't ask me why in the period, why in the context, I decided to just, boom, catapult myself in Japan. Next thing I know, boom, I was in Osaka. Opposite reality of whatever I was living in Aotearoa, but also was very beautiful to embrace a modern context that was pretty much not so Eurocentric. Was very much coming from a different culture also, with their own ways, of course still benefiting from the extraction of colonization, because most of the resources to create all the Japanese technology was definitely not coming from those tiny islands, period. It was still something very interesting to witness. I spent a couple of days looking for a bicycle. Once I found the bicycle, I was out. As soon as I was outside, I started to naturally meeting up the ancient Japan, the ancient houses, the ancient temples, the monks. Was very harmonious to witness. And that Zen way, so clean, so precious, so mindful. Especially in the rural Japan, I met so much mindfulness. And then I remember ending up with the bicycle in this particular place. It was one of the 100 holy mountains of Japan called Omine-Samji. And a particular belief got developed within that area called Shumengo. It was pretty much a philosophy based on the physical challenge going through the physical challenge in order to going beyond the limitation of the body, therefore the limitation of the mind, and therefore developing the unity among oneself and the realm of nature. Shumengo was something that I never heard of, yet I resonate incredibly with, because that's what I was doing, especially with this journey, challenging my body, challenging my mind in order to find union with nature, therefore the divine. So in order to go on the temple, you need to go through some serious challenge of climbing slippery rocks, keep on walking and hiking and trekking and climbing again until you will meet this beautiful, incredible temple. Once there, they welcomed me there to spend the night there, and I remember the view on top of the clouds was something indescribable. Then yeah, meeting up also beautiful people, beautiful monks, and learning a lot from them. And then at some point I was like, let me just cross borders with the bicycle. Let me keep on doing it with the bicycle. I was on an island, Japan was an island, so I needed to go to the mainland. And I was like, let me go to South Korea. Then from South Korea, I will try to reach Southeast Asia with the bicycle by going through North Korea, China, going down to Cambodia, then Laos and Thailand. But what I didn't know was that I could not, because of political situation, going from South Korea to North Korea so easily. So I couldn't take the flight. I still managed to change and take a flight to Laos. And then from Laos, the idea was to reach Thailand. So boom, next things I know, I'm cycling in the middle of the jungle. I was never challenged so much. Literally was so rough. I was not expecting such a hilly area that literally 70% of the path I was pushing the bicycle with a big backpack. It was incredibly challenging. So I spent a couple of weeks and I reached Thailand, and it was so satisfying. I was like, damn, I'm crossing the borders with my own legs, and that was so empowering. Traveling internationally was also possible while relying completely on one's resources, instead of relying on resources that because of modern times were completely capitalized. To be honest, I felt to go back to India. And of course, we cannot really talk about India, especially the northern part of India, without mentioning Nepal, that they are definitely culturally very much different. Yet, one gives a lot to the other, I must say, especially with the story of Gautama Buddha. And now, back then, there was not such a thing as India and Nepal. I heard a lot while I was in north of India about Nepal. And this time I was like, let me dig more into this amazing culture that gave birth to so many different sages. So that's what I did. I went to Nepal. In the meantime, I applied for the Indian visa while I was there. While there, I bumped into a name that I already heard before, Vipassana. It's a Pali name that is an indigenous language of that area. Pretty much can be translated as observing things as they really are. I got to know that Vipassana was a whole meditation technique. It was something that could be practiced in a type of monastery where you would have gone there and commit for 10 days to live the life of a monk with even more restrictions. Not touching anybody, don't look anybody in the eyes, don't do any physical activity, eating strictly vegetarian, and meditating for 14 to 15 hours a day. I decided to go for it. The realization gained from that meditation was something incredibly strong, very challenging. The mind likes to go up and down, left and right, and that was the challenge. And boom, after that, I decided to go to India, but I didn't go anywhere in India. I decided to knock at somebody's house. This person didn't know that I was going there. I didn't know I was in India whatsoever. Didn't know I was in Nepal. Yes, you might have guessed it. I knocked Rahul's house. Hello? Hello, Rahul. I was not even aware if he was there or not. I see Rahul coming out of his house. He looked at me, shocked that he went back in his house. Comes back out, like, thinking maybe I was a sort of ghost or something. He was like, my man, and we hugged each other, and it was such a beautiful, emotional, real brotherhood time. That was a next level feeling. It was like, wow, surprising him after a couple of years, and so much has passed since then, and his mother was there. The mother was like, Jazz! Wow, it was such a beautiful encounter. Of course, I was also in touch with Rahul. In the meantime, also Uncle G, his father, passed away. And but was still, of course, among us, was still in the house, was still there, no doubt about it. I didn't stay at Rahul's place for too long this time. It was just enough to re-embrace each other, hug each other, feeling each other. I wanted to explore more of India, more of the ancientness that I only heard before, but I didn't dive in. I really wanted to go deep on the Himalayas, where, once again, the sages were. I took a bus that within 17 hours brought me the most beautiful environment I've ever witnessed in my whole life, Jammu and Kashmir. A bit controversial because of the very political situation. There was a place where I really wanted to go. I went through a military check and they told me, you shouldn't go there alone. You'll be in danger. And I asked, why dangerous? Because of some, terrorist situation, but mostly because of leopard. So I still went for it. And the environment, once again, was incredible. I met this family relying on their stock, milking cows, and I just pitched the tent next to their house, and they invited me to go there having a tea with them. And then I kept on walking and seeing for the first time in my whole life wild horses. I was not believing what my eyes were seeing. Wild horses. I was blown. Their beauties, their hairs, their posture was unbelievable. I felt grounded like never before. The oxygen was very low. Even just every step I could feel such a fatigue. Like we're talking about 3,000-4,000 meters above the sea level. So it was very rough. It was a group of lakes on top of the mountain that I heard of. So I was trying to look for them in order to have an environment where I could just sit, have water, and eventually also fast, but at least having water. So I was walking, and the lake was something so, I was just melting from the glacier, and bathing on the lake was so refreshing, and practicing and moving and meditating was something so needed, I started digging more and more within my solitude, within myself, within the divine within me, I would say, the divine that was surrounds me, and I was intoxicated of love. I felt to dive myself into a kind of different environment, still to explore a few things about myself. And I ended up in the Thar Desert, the second biggest desert in the world. Also over there, meditating alone for a few days. I remember I ended up in Mumbai, meeting up people that I met in Jammu and Kashmir. Nirmal was such a beautiful man, like a very deep person with his brother, so smart and so incredibly on top of its game. And what it really shocked me about Nirmal was actually his mother, full of joy and happiness, like pure joy and happiness. I connected a lot in those few days with them, until the point that I felt it deep in my heart. It's time for me to go back to the continent, to the mother continent. It's time for me to go to Africa. Right now we are at the end of 2015. I'm 24 years old, and all until this point I never went to Africa. Maybe the most mind-blowing thing about this whole story. So it was for me time to reconnect to the mother roots, not only of myself, but of humanity. All these experiences that I had all around the world eventually were finding their home in the mother continent, in the huge continent, full on of culture of Africa. I wanted to go to Ghana, but there was something about Madiba, Nelson Mandela, that called me more than anything else. It was a period that I was very much digging into the work that he did in South Africa, and especially about his youth in Kunu, the place where he was born and raised, that apparently, according to his book, was a full-on natural environment where people were really relying on local resources while also preserving their ancient ways. And I remember I was lost in the beauty of this first chapter of his book, The Long Walk to Freedom. And this was for me so strong that made me leave India and going back to the motherland by starting from South Africa. So now in Kunu, within the Xhosa culture, and Xhosa, the click that they use, I'm still trying to hold on to that I learned, but it's very hard. So I'm in Kunu, the place where Nelson Mandela is from. And I walked around, and then at some point, I started talking with this guy, an innocent guy around my age. I was like, oh yeah, where are you from? What are you doing? Where are you going to stay? I said, well, I'm not sure. I'm trying to still look for a place where I can just pitch the tent. And he was like, here is very dangerous. I wouldn't do that. And I was like, oh no, I will be fine. I said, oh, come with me. Let me bring you to my house. Same story all over the world. Nobody would allow me to just pitch a freaking tent, long story short. This young man brought me to his house, introduced me to his grandfather and his older brother. They were making fire and they were cooking some, I forgot what it was, pop. I think they were calling pop, which was a corn porridge. It was very tasty, So they offered me some of this porridge. And the young man was like, oh yeah, you can sleep with me in my room, no problem, man. And you can just chill and do your thing. So I ended up staying there for 10 days. And I remember his mother came and was doing such a great bread, was next level, was like broford. as we could call them here. And crazy enough, what turns out is that his grandfather was actually a very close friend of Nelson Mandela, Madiba. And I was like, Aish, life! I mean, on the end of the day, Kunu was not such a big village whatsoever, and whoever elders were still there, of course, were connected to each other. Their grandfather couldn't speak a fluent English, but I was having so many questions that the older brother was translating and was allowing me to communicate with. It was so interesting to hear the story from an original point of view. Also, the house of Nelson Mandela was actually across the road. We could see it from afar. But I remember connecting so much with the kids. Once again, the kids, the most pure form of life, especially with Nkosi. The way I was vibing with Nkosi. I was dancing with them, I was vibing with them, I was playing with them. And once again, I'm having this thing with kids that there's no limitation. Everything is just full on. You're naked, you're not ashamed. You're just your freaking self. That was my journey was all about being oneself in its purest form. I went to a place called Coffee Bay, meeting up with some beautiful people. One of them was Judah, also known as Buddha. He's the one that told me so much about Ethiopia, to the point that the next things I know, I'm in Ethiopia. It was a very also interesting chapter. Addis Ababa, seeing a lot of similarity to Milan, because the Italians tried to colonize it, but it didn't work. But there were still some names like La Piazza and a few other things that resonated with Milan. It was very weird, but especially after all those years. By now we are in 2016. But also incredibly beautiful, especially when I traveled down to Shashamane, which was the place that Haile Selassie gave to whoever wanted to repatriate to the motherland. So it was a very cultural and strong rooting experience for me. That was surely still very far away from Ghana, but close enough to feel home. Especially because in Ethiopia, I was literally Ethiopian. Until my mouth was open, I was Ethiopian. Also witnessing that they were going through a different calendar. I was there was 2016. When I arrived there was 2008. It was a different language, different way of doing things. So it felt maybe the less colonized place where I've been a part of India. It didn't remind me a lot of India, to be honest. After the chapter, I was fully ready to go back to London. It was a very butterfly chapter because it was the time that I managed to see a lot of people that I left years before. All the bonds and relationships that I established once in Italy, but also once in London, I had the chance to re-embrace them and to share with them all that I lived in these years in order to share a life of self-sustainability, in freedom, in connection to our roots that ultimately are divine, Mother Nature. But also it was quite of a big slap on my face because I could truthfully see and feel that I was there just to share. And in my naive mind, I was hoping that by sharing, people would get also motivated to leave that polluted, exploitative, racial, and dependent environment in order to go towards our nature, towards our indigenous roots. But nothing like that happened, of course. People were doing their own things. People want to live their life, making their choices, of course. And I was no one in order to have the right to convince somebody to live their lives. There was nothing left for me to deeply exchange. I changed too much, to the point that also the Western context was not, of course, livable for me. So I started to accept very harshly that if I wanted to live a life of freedom and self-sustainability, it would have been most likely alone. And I accepted it. And for me, this price was surely worth it. I was not looking to spend time alone, but I learned how to spend time alone, and I knew also how important it is to spend time alone. So I was not afraid to go for the journey, and I was definitely ready for it. I was like, okay, it's time for me to go. After 1.5 years, I worked a little bit in London. I got to know some actual other people. And then in the meantime, I wrote a book that is still, by the way, in the working process. Maybe soon a publishing will take place, but everything on the right time. It was time for me to leave. It was time for me to leave the Western world for good. I wanted to go to Samoa, but there was something about the fast Westernization that I've seen with my own eyes that I couldn't trust as much. I decided to try first to go into a clean, untouched environment. And the only place where I could do that were in this so-called national park. I was not even willing to buy land. I was willing to dive fully myself into the wild, living this life, this earthly life, until becoming earth once again. Therefore, a whole new journey starts. Me going looking for this land is a whole new chapter that eventually brought me in this very land. So this is what I'm going to show you with the next upcoming part. So far, stay tuned, turn on your notification, don't forget to subscribe, and of course, share it. Share it with whoever you feel like. So far, it's been a whole journey, and a new one will come up. Take care. Catch you soon for real.